Celsius stock may thrive as Pepsi and Coca-Cola face headwinds.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it really caught my eye because Celsius stock is trading so much lower than it was earlier this year.
Makes you wonder why.
Right. So that's what we're going to try to figure out today. What's going on with Celsius and what does it all mean for investors? Maybe there's an opportunity here.
Yeah, could be.
So, the beverage industry is going through some big changes right now.
Oh, yeah, definitely. All these new health regulations, right? They're really targeting ingredients like high fructose corn syrup.
Right, and it's hitting the big guys pretty hard.
Yeah,
Coke and Pepsi, they use a ton of that stuff.
exactly. It's going to be interesting to see how they adapt.
Well, that's the thing, right? This crackdown, it doesn't really affect Celsius.
Because they don't use high fructose corn syrup. That makes Celsius a much safer bet right now.
Yeah, I see that. They're
Yeah.
kind of like, avoiding all the chaos.
Yeah, well, everyone else is scrambling.
Right. It's like they're in their own lane.
Totally. And something called market inefficiencies?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think things get really interesting because sometimes the best opportunities, they kind of get overlooked because everyone's so focused on what's going wrong.
Yeah, they're too busy looking at the drama.
Exactly. So Celsius could be this hidden gem, this stock that's poised to take off.
While Coke and Pepsi are busy figuring things out.
Exactly.
It's not just about avoiding the bad stuff, though, right? I mean, there are actually some things working in Celsius's favor right now.
Oh, like what?
Well, think about these trade tariffs everyone's talking about. They could actually lead to more inflation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that might actually benefit domestic companies like Celsius.
So even though inflation can be a bad thing overall, in this case, it might actually help Celsius.
Right. It could give them a competitive edge.
Wow. So it's like Celsius is kind of in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, kind of. And it looks like the food and beverage industry might be picking up steam, too.
Yeah.
Have you seen that manufacturing PMI index lately?
Oh, right. Yeah. It's looking pretty positive.
Yeah, so, things are looking up.
Okay, but we got to talk about valuations too, right?
Oh, absolutely. We can't ignore that.
And the article mentions that Celsius has a pretty high price to earnings ratio, like 40.2x.
So for every dollar Celsius earns, investors are paying over $40 for the stock. That's high.
Yeah, it's a lot higher than average. And their price to book ratio is pretty high too, at 25.4x.
Right, so that basically means the market has pretty high hopes for Celsius. They're expecting big things.
But the article also mentions that analysts have set a price target of 54.4 per share for Celsius.
Oh.
Yeah, and that would be almost an 88% increase from where it's trading right now. So maybe it's not as overpriced as it seems.
Okay, so even though the valuation is high, there might still be room for growth. It all comes down to whether Celsius can actually deliver.
Exactly. And speaking of expectations, we have to see what Wall Street's thinking, right?
Always a good idea. What are they saying?
Well, the article points out that short interest in Celsius has actually gone down lately, like by almost 6% in the past month.
Oh, so the people betting against Celsius are starting to back off a little.
Yeah, it seems like even the skeptics are getting less confident. And it's not just them. The article says that big institutional investors like hedge funds and stuff, they've put a ton of money into Celsius over the past year.
Like, how much are we talking?
Over $3 billion.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So clearly some big players are seeing something in Celsius.
Yeah. And it's not just about the amount of money, it's also about who's investing. The article mentions State Street specifically. They've been increasing their stake in Celsius.
Interesting. Like they're putting their money where their mouth is, right?
Exactly. So you've got this company that's kind of dodging the bullets, benefiting from these trends, and attracting attention from some major investors. Makes you wonder, what's the catch?
Yeah, it's got to be something, right? There's always a catch.
Well, the article says that the upcoming quarterly earnings announcements could be really important for Celsius's stock price. But it also talks about market perception.
Ah, so it's not just about the numbers. It's also about how people see Celsius.
Right. They need to make sure that investors understand they're not like Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah.
They're doing things differently.
Yeah, they got to break free from that negative association.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. Will the market get it? Will they see Celsius as this unique player in the beverage industry? Or will they just lump them in with everyone else? I guess we'll have to wait and see.
It's like a cliffhanger.
I know, right?
So much to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've covered a lot already, from the regulatory changes to Wall Street sentiment.
It's like we've laid out all the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Like we've got all the pieces now. But you know what's really interesting?
What's that?
Like, what does it actually mean for the average investor?
Oh, right. Good point. We've talked about how Celsius might be undervalued, but there's that bigger picture too.
Yeah, like all those market trends. How do those play into this?
Right. Like the trade tariffs and inflation. That stuff could affect like the whole beverage industry, not just Celsius.
Exactly. It gets kind of complicated there.
Mm.
Um, on the one hand, inflation could actually be good for Celsius.
How so?
Well, if all those imported drinks start getting more expensive, people might switch to domestic brands like Celsius.
Makes sense. But then again, if everyone's got less money to spend because of inflation.
Right. Even if Celsius is a good deal, people might just buy fewer drinks overall.
It's tough to say how it'll all shake out.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. And honestly, the article doesn't really go into all the macroeconomic stuff that deeply.
Okay, so it's more like a starting point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like this deep dive, it's just the beginning.
We're giving people the basic info, but they gotta stay on top of things if they want to make smart decisions.
That's the key takeaway here. Investing isn't a one-time thing. It's all about constantly learning and adapting.
Totally. All right, so before we wrap up our deep dive on Celsius, I kind of want to switch gears for a second.
Okay, what do you have in mind?
We've talked a lot about why Celsius might be a good investment, all the potential upsides, but every investment has its risks, right?
Of course, absolutely. Nothing's guaranteed. That's like investing 101.
Exactly. So let's play devil's advocate here. What could go wrong with Celsius?
Good question.
Well, there's the inflation thing we talked about. Like, even if Celsius is in a better position than its competitors, inflation could still hurt their sales if it gets bad enough.
Yeah, true. And even though those regulations are helping them right now, things could change.
How so?
Well, what if they start cracking down on other ingredients that Celsius uses? Or what if there are totally new regulations down the line?
Yeah, it's hard to predict what the government will do.
Exactly. And then there's the competition to think about. Sure, Celsius is doing great now, but the beverage industry is fierce.
Yeah, someone new could come along and shake things up. Or, Coke and Pepsi could adapt and start taking back market share.
Absolutely. They've been around forever for a reason. They know how to play the game.
And we can't forget about Celsius's valuation either. Like, yeah, the market expects them to grow a lot, but what if they don't?
Right. Their stock price could plummet. Those high valuations, they can come back to bite you.
So, yeah, while Celsius looks promising, there are definitely some risks to consider.
For sure.
It's important to go into this with your eyes wide open. Do your research, weigh the pros and cons, and don't invest more than you can afford to lose.
Words to live by.
For real, investing isn't about getting rich quick. It's a long game.
Totally.
Gotta be patient and make smart choices.
Well said.
All right, so I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Wow, we've really dug deep into Celsius today, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been quite the exploration.
I mean, from their position in the market to the challenges they might face, there's a lot to consider.
Definitely. And, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about, too. Like a framework for analyzing this investment.
Exactly. We've talked about trends and regulations, valuations, even investor psychology.
It's all connected.
Right. But, at the end of the day, we're not here to tell people what to do.
Oh, definitely not.
We're just trying to give them the information they need to make their own decisions.
Informed decisions.
Exactly. That's the key.
Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
Especially with investing.
Absolutely. And part of that knowledge is understanding the risks involved.
Right. Every investment has risks. It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah, for sure. So we've highlighted why Celsius might be a good opportunity, but we also got to keep the bigger picture in mind.
Yeah, things like the economy, those regulations, the competition.
That stuff can impact Celsius's success no matter what.
Definitely. You got to stay on top of it all.
So where do we go from here? Well, we've laid the groundwork, but the research doesn't stop here.
It's like a jumping off point.
Exactly. Encourage our listeners to dig deeper into everything we've discussed today, Do their own research.
Come to their own conclusions about Celsius.
Yeah, and think about their own investment goals, too.
Their own risk tolerance.
Yeah.
What makes sense for their portfolio.
Exactly. We're here to guide them along the way, but ultimately those decisions are up to them.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our Celsius deep dive.
It's been a great discussion. Lots to learn.
And we hope you'll join us next time as we continue to explore the world of investing.
Always something new to discover.
Until then, happy investing, everyone.